What's going on for you?
I think I'm struggling mainly. I go through. I've used your like 2 month daily study guide, everything like that. What I really struggle with though, even when I sort of redo and do again a lot of the logic games, I still don't get all of the inferences that I need to. Just going into it, I'll know the right answer after I've looked through it, but I don't think I can intuitively connect with that initial like understanding that inference. So I'd love your input into that.
Okay, sure. So tell me more about where this comes up.
So in particular, I really struggle mainly a lot of the time with basic sequencing games and then in-out games. And I do a lot better on what is like considered like the more advanced games, like, you know, advanced linear, all that kind of stuff. But when it comes to things like very basic sequencing games, they tend to have 7 questions, and especially those, if you took away a rule, which rule would supplant it, and all that kind of stuff. Those are the sorts of questions where even when I think that I have the inferences down, I sort of like shut down at that point. I don't think I fully understand where to go from there.
Okay, so what does your inference making process look like when you start a game?
So initially, like creating the actual game board, putting the pieces on the left hand of the page, and then creating the actual game board and trying to create whatever chain or the logic, whatever might follow from that initially. But when I get to maybe like the 4th or 5th question, I always feel like there must be something I'm missing here, all that. And then once I like go back, do a blind review, I'll be super confident in my answer, and then I'll find out, I got it wrong.
I hear you. All right, so who else here tonight is experiencing a similar issue around logic games? Just raise your hand, nod, smile, give some indication to Ian that he's not alone in this, if that is true for you. Yeah, so I see a few folks agreeing with you there. This is a common experience. So you're definitely not alone in this, Ian. Now, how many minutes do you spend on that initial setup, making inferences before you dive into the questions?
Usually too long, to be honest. Probably like 3 or 4.
3 or 4 minutes. Okay.
Yeah.
That seems pretty reasonable to me. And you mentioned ordering games, conditional in-out games. You also talked about rule substitution, which comes up in all different game types.
Yeah.
Because it seems like a pretty broad issue for you here. Now, let me ask you this. Do you need to make all the inferences up front? And what does making all the inferences mean?
So I guess I don't, to your point, I don't need to make all of the inferences. I guess what I'm struggling with is I always think when I'm at that 4th or 5th question, there must be something that I'm missing when I take that first pass onto it. And I think that just like going through each individual question and all that, there's always something where, when I see something that I've gotten wrong at the end after doing a blind review, I always think like, if only I had thought of that, like in my initial prep, I would have been able to get that question right.
2 things occur to me. One is, do you do the game's questions with the questions within a game in the order given? So I'll start with that one.
Yes.
Okay. That's something I want us to revisit, the idea of maybe doing them in a different order. Second thing is, sometimes inferences won't always come to you. And it's not always automatic that they would come to you. Some things are just random where you would never naturally derive that inference up front. So it may not even be realistic. The second thing is, let's have a plan B for if you don't make every reasonable inference up front, in part because part of it comes down to personal preference. Sometimes you may make a ton of inferences up front, and that's fantastic. Other times you may not see it, and that's okay, but you could have seen it. So in those cases where you could have seen it but didn't, what can you do differently?
I think that my first inclination is always to try and think like, okay, if only I made the game board slightly different or something like that when it's a particularly hard problem or something. But
no, I'm going to cut you off there because that's a what if. That's like a wishing pie in the sky sort of thing. Let's be real here.
Sure. I yeah, it's a tough one to answer initially. I'm not entirely sure.
That's fine. You don't have to know. That's what the community is here for you. And I'm here for you too. So who has an answer for Ian? Who has an idea for Ian about what he might do differently? No wrong answers here, just playing. It's okay. I know it's scary. This is a new format for everybody.
My name is Jackie, and something that I found is that sometimes simpler is better for the inferences, because it's worse to make an incorrect inference and then act upon it. So just making sure that you have at least the bare bones skeleton that's a working piece, and not expecting that you're going to have an epiphany and just solve everything in 2 minutes, because you don't necessarily need to do that to get everything right.
That's excellent. Thank you for that, Jackie. I would agree 100%. You don't need to have everything to get everything right. That's a huge insight there, meaning that sometimes what you have could be enough. It may not be all the inferences in the world. Another idea is to use previous work. So if you approach the questions out of order, you will maximize the number of valid hypothetical scenarios that you have available to you to later help you solve those more general global questions that involve major inferences, like what in general must be true or what in general cannot be true. Sometimes you'll make the inference up front. Sometimes you won't. Sometimes it's a natural thing that half the people could have done and did, and half the people didn't see it. But other times it's something so random and so little that you would never even think to get it up front. And that's fine. That's where those previous scenarios come into play. We also have a comment here from Emily in the chat saying, try to separate out the limiting variables, which is a great strategy for making inferences up front. Emily, would you want to share more on that? Feel free to unmute yourself if you like.
So I was actually more commenting on the last part of what Ian had talked about, which was the rule substitution questions that come at the end, not the first part. But usually when I have those sorts of questions that I'm looking at, it'll be a situation where they'll be talking about two pieces, but then a third piece might have been involved either between them or on both of them. And so that's a sort of limiting variable that would need to be accounted for in a specific way in the answer choice. And so I don't know if I worded it quite correctly, but that's what usually helps make those kinds of questions faster for me.
Well, thanks for that, Emily. And by the way, I have a ton on rule substitution questions. Any of you who are in my course, I have plenty there. I also have plenty on YouTube and my LSAT blog as well. If you just search rule substitution or equivalent rule on my YouTube channel or blog, you'll find plenty there as well. I know we have a conversation coming up soon, Ian, as well, so we could talk more about it then as also. Anything else on your mind, Ian? Anything else we could support you with?
I mean, that is my primary concern right now. I'm totally willing to open the floor up.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining in. I appreciate it. Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.